Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Shmuley Show. Okay, edition. Look at your screens. Okay. President Trump just renamed the Department of Defense Department of War. You're probably wondering, why? Well, first of all, let's just go back in history. A year after the ratification of the American Constitution, which was largely written by James Madison, but ratified by all 13 states, colonies that became states, of course, after the Revolutionary War and America's victory. A year after, with President Washington now installed as our first commander-in-chief, the United States created the Department of War. It was always called the Department of War. When Edwin Stanton ran it in the Civil War, it was called the Department of War. When Stintinius ran it during the Second World War under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, it was called Department of War. It was only reorganized under Harry S. Truman and under Congress in 1947 to 1949. They separated the Air Force from the Army Air Corps. That became its own independent branches. We now have 5 branches of the military. Let's go through them. Navy, Marines, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard. Okay. All of that was done in 1947. And defense sounds so much more noble, right? It sounds so much more moral. We're only here to defend. We're not here to declare war. So why? I actually endorse President Trump's change. So why? Trump's main point was that since the Second World War, the United States has not fought a single war to actually win. Ever since the Second World War, we are always fighting with one hand tied behind our back. Whether it was in Vietnam, where half the hand tied behind our back was that so much of the country just grew tired and weary of the war, because you have to have wars that are either quick and decisive or at least hold on to public support. The Second World War was not quick and decisive. The United States got involved on the 7th of December 1941. It didn't end until May 8th, 1945, 4 years nearly. But the public was behind it. That was not true of Vietnam. We did not fight to win. We fought to negotiate. We fought for a stalemate. LBJ felt undermined by the American people. He felt undermined by his own conscience. Israel, of course, doesn't fight to win wars, which is why it doesn't win them. You don't think that Israel can win the war against Hamas in 48 hours? Of course it can. But Israel's a moral army, and it also has to contend with national sentiment within Israel and international sentiment. And the United States is the same. So Trump's argument is, I don't want a Department of Defense because America lost the war in Iraq, lost the war in Afghanistan, lost the war in Vietnam. How could the world's greatest superpower lose against the Taliban? Answer, you're never fighting to win. America didn't lose those wars. America never really fully fought those wars. That's why we lost. But let's call it what it is. We lost in Vietnam. Today, Vietnam, there is no South Vietnam. We fought for South Vietnam for 10 years. There's only one communist government. When the North Vietnamese came in 1975, having abrogated all the treaties that were signed between Kissinger and Nixon with Lu Duc Tho and the government of North Korea, they killed about 3 million South Korean civilians and then took over our embassy. You all remember the famous ugly pictures of American Marines having to evacuate people from rooftops, etc. And with Israel also, you just see these endless stalemates. War. Ever since Hamas took over in Gaza in 2006, Israel's gone to war 5 times. And why? Because Israel's also not fighting to win. Now, I understand how handcuffed the democracies are in fighting wars. Unlike Hamas that can perpetrate any kind of barbarity, unlike the Nazis who could perpetrate any kind of barbarity, unlike Imperial Japan, which could do any kind of barbarity. Unlike North Vietnam, who could perpetrate any kind of barbarity. They can fight any way they want, kill anyone they want, and no one's going to criticize them because no one has expectations of terrorists, killers, and barbarians. The United States has a free press, so they're going to report what's happening in Vietnam. Israel has a free press. They're going to report what's going on in Gaza. The United States has a free press. They're going to report what's going on in Afghanistan, et cetera, et cetera. So when Israel or the United States takes the necessary measures to end these wars or fight them to a conclusion, they are so hampered and hindered by fake international law, by fake reports of civilian deaths, et cetera. So like with Israel. Remember this kid that was being trumpeted? They said Israel killed him, a 12-year-old kid. And Israel starved him to death, bombed him, and now he turned up alive like last week. That was even admitted by the New York Times, everywhere else. Remember the starving baby in the New York Times that cost Israel so much of his reputation a month ago, and it turned out that the kid wasn't starving at all, that he has muscular dystrophy. His brother, who was cropped out of the shot by the New York Times, was of perfect weight, perfect health, as was his mother. The problem is that when you have all of these considerations, you cannot fight to win a war. You fight only to defend, and then these wars go on forever. Our war, the United States, September 11th is what, 5 days off? 3 miles down the road here. We fought that war in Afghanistan because of Osama bin Laden's attack for 20 years, and we lost that war. Nothing's changed. The Taliban are back in power. What changed is the United States spent $1 trillion. We lost 5,000 American heroes who died, and we're back to square one. Why? Because America can't defeat the Taliban? No. It's because we did not fight to win, and that's Trump's whole point. So how do democracies fight to win? First of all, the first thing that these fiends who fight us do is they take hostages. That's what happened with Jimmy Carter and our embassy in 1979. You take 55 Americans hostage. What are you supposed to do? You handcuff a superpower, and we were handcuffed. But notice that when Ronald Reagan came into power, they released those hostages instantly because they were afraid of him. So the first answer is you win wars by so scaring your opponent that even if they have hostages, they release them because they don't all want to die. Israel has not done that. Israel has repeatedly said, we're going to destroy Hamas, we're going to ruin Hamas. But it can't fully bomb them because they're so fully ensconced with civilians, and Israel's such a moral army that it can't do that. And all this garbage that you're hearing, 60,000 people died. Remember, Hamas, first of all, that's according to the Hamas health ministry. And secondly, they don't even distinguish between combatants and between civilians. But Israel's still handcuffed because Israel doesn't want to kill its own hostages, let alone kill Palestinian children. It's a major problem. That democracies in an age of an open media can no longer fight wars to their conclusions because the media is always trying to point out that the democracy fighting it is really the bad guy. That's what happened in Iraq. We couldn't fight to win because CNN is there saying, look how awful the American soldiers are. We couldn't fight to win in Afghanistan because, NPR is there. Look how awful American Rangers are. Just imagine if we had Edward R. Murrow not broadcasting from London during the Blitz, but if Edward R. Murrow was broadcasting from, say, Dresden, or from Cologne, or from Berlin, or from Tokyo, or from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and had he survived those bombings and the atomic bombing, he would be reporting about American atrocities. Those would be the stories, and that's what we have right now. So what's the solution? The solution is that you kind of have to bite the bullet. You have to accept that if you don't end wars quickly, so many more innocents are going to die. If Israel doesn't finish this war in Gaza quickly, and does that mean, God forbid, endangering the lives of the hostages? It's hard to say. It's a terrible thing to have to even contemplate. It's a terrible thing to have to contemplate. But remember, those 25 people who may still be alive, the only way they're going to be rescued is through blunt military force. They will not be rescued through negotiations. What I'm saying is we have to rescue the hostages, but we have to rescue them through military force. We have to destroy the Islamists, and we should have destroyed the Taliban. We had to do it through blunt military force. Are civilians going to die? Tragically, yes. Tragically, yes, because civilians die in war. But unless you bite the bullet and say some civilians are going to die, but we will end up saving the lives of millions more by destroying this evil, you will never have an end to war. You're only going to fight endless wars and lose them. That's why the United States won in World War II, because they said, we're only going to fight until unconditional surrender. No negotiations. And that's what should happen with Israel and Hamas. Why the hell is Israel continually telling Hamas, we're going to talk to you now, we're going to talk to you tomorrow? Steve Witkoff, who I love, is a very good man. He's a righteous man. But with all due respect, Steve, God bless you. You're being played by Hamas. You're meeting them in Geneva. You're meeting them in Zurich. You're meeting them in Doha. They're full of crap. Don't negotiate. You say, listen, Hamas, you have one choice. It's called unconditional surrender. Your only choice is to surrender unconditionally. Other than that, Israel is going in fully and completely. Oh, they're going to dangle our hostages. We're going to kill your hostages. They're going to kill them anyway. The only hope for those hostages is the destruction and annihilation of Hamas. That's why Trump renamed the Department of Defense the Department of War. You don't defend. You go on offense. When evil people attack you, you frickin' go after them so they can't hurt innocent people anymore. And that was George W. Bush's mistake. He did go after the Taliban, but not sufficiently, and he lost that war. He did go after Saddam Hussein. And we can debate whether that was the right war or not. Most people today feel the Iraq war was a huge mistake, but that's not why we lost. We lost because we didn't fight it to win. We never had enough troops. We never had enough equipment. Donald Rumsfeld, of blessed memory, was a good man, but he really made huge mistakes with that war because he thought that he could fight it on the cheap with only 150,000 troops. We should have poured in 500,000 American troops and destroyed them and defeated them. And then after the war, we should have said to Iraq, you're going to have a constitution, you're going to have liberties, or America will frickin' stay here and bring in our partners in the EU and others until you have a proper democracy with a constitution with human rights. So you're going to say, oh, they do have that. No, they don't. No, they don't. The fact that Iraq today is nothing but a satellite of Iran. Our boys, 5,000 American soldiers died, and we spent $1 million just to have another frickin' Iranian proxy army and an Iranian proxy state. So I believe in what President Trump said. A Department of War. If you're going to declare war, then you demand unconditional surrender and you fight it to the very end, the way Lincoln fought the Civil War. You know why there's no slavery in America? You know why there's still a union? You know why there's no Confederacy? Because we didn't negotiate with Robert E. Lee. Because we didn't negotiate with Jefferson Davis. Because we didn't negotiate with Braxton Bragg. Because we didn't negotiate with Stonewall Jackson. We defeated and destroyed their armies. That's why there's only a United States of America and not a half union and a half confederacy. Thank God. I'm going to have some coffee to calm down. So I agree with President Trump completely. You don't fight wars with half measures. And by the way, the name Israel, Yisrael, means he who wars with God. Yisrael, he who struggles, he who wrestles with. The very name Israel is Department of War. Who are we warring against? We're warring against evil. We're warring against Hamas. We're warring against all the injustice of the world. That's why God gave the Jewish people this unique. We should have put that on Do Not Disturb. It's stuck. God gave the Jewish people a unique role. God gave the Jewish people a unique role, which is to always confront and fight against evil, which is why our religion believes in kosher hatred. There is hatred that is allowed. There is hatred that is kosher when it's against evil. You must hate evil. You must fight evil. You must resist evil. You cannot make deals with evil. So, I'm wondering if the IDF shouldn't change its name instead of Israel Defense Forces. All the anti-Semites write to me anyway. They call it the IOF. I think the Israel Offensive Forces. I've never liked the word defense. I love the IDF. I love the three letters IDF. And Israel's such a moral country that it only defends, just like our. But maybe Israel has to understand that the only way it's going to survive is if it is prepared to war against all of these genocidal animals, these terrorists, these killers, these monsters that are up against it, that want to commit a genocide of the Jews, who are committed to a second Holocaust of the Jews. Maybe that's the only way we're going to understand that, unfortunately, some wars, they go on forever, like the war against anti-Semitism. It just never seems to stop. And you could do one of two things. You could stop being Jewish, you could let yourself be gassed, or you could just continue to fight for what's right and for what's good. In the same way we all fight for our families every day. I mean, did someone, like, when you get married, does someone just give you a trust fund? No. You have to fight every day to support your family, to feed your family, to educate your kids. Sometimes we have to argue with our children in the right way to teach them right from wrong. Some fights go on forever, but the fight for right certainly goes on forever because evil is continually rearing its ugly head. Isn't that what my Christian brothers and sisters believe? Satan and Lucifer are always going to fight us, and even us Jews. People who we don't believe in Lucifer. We don't believe in dualism. There is no light and darkness. There's only God. But some people exist in the shadows. They live outside of God's light, and they want to specifically target those who are purveyors of the light, those who give light. So I completely endorse President Trump's new Department of War and get rid of the word Department of Defense. And it just shows you that Trump is keenly aware. And he said it so succinctly. They said, why are you changing the name? He said, because since the Second World War, we don't fight to win wars. We only fight to defend. And they go on forever. And men die for no reason. And that's where you have loss of morale among so many soldiers. They went to Vietnam and they saw, wait a second, if you don't have the political commitment to win, why are you sending us? Why are you letting 55,000 Americans die? Listen, in the Civil War, 700,000 Americans died. And yet no one from the North gave up on the battle because they knew that Lincoln was in it to win it. In the Second World War with FDR, they knew he was in it to win it. With President Harry Truman, it took over at the end of the war. They knew he was in it to win it. George Washington, with his soldiers barefoot, with their toes having to being frozen off at Valley Forge, he was still in it to win it. So there was high morale because they understood the objective of the war. But when you don't fight it to win it, so I'm telling Prime Minister Netanyahu, I've known for 37 years, you're a great man, you're the greatest Jew alive, you've done amazing things since the terrible tragedies of October 7th. Prime Minister, you must fight this war to win it. Stop saying you're going to negotiate with Hamas. The only way to save the hostages is to save them militarily. It's to have our soldiers from the IDF go in and rescue them. It's to beat Hamas and pound them so mercilessly, these animals, that they are forced to release the hostages because they themselves don't want to die. And even some of the jihadis who think they're going to 70 virgins, all the Hamas billionaires, all the ones who live in Qatar and Doha, they don't want to die. They send everyone else to die. And it's time that we brought this war in Gaza to a conclusion by demanding unconditional surrender from Hamas, the way President Roosevelt demanded it of Hitler and the Nazis. Unconditional surrender. That is the way you win wars. I'd love to hear your comments, and God bless you all.